Well, welcome to another episode of the Grazing Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Big Tom Perkins, along with Dr. Cameron Meyerly. And I guess we've got a couple of announcements to make. One, I want to apologize to those of you who listen to us at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning because you didn't find us until sometime on Wednesday.
Yeah, I got a text that morning, well, Wednesday morning, and I was under the flu A outbreak that's sweeping across most of this part of America. And they were just checking to make sure, we were alive and, people hadn't been dead and buried because the podcast didn't come out Tuesday. I was like, oh no, I did not want to have to be the one to deliver this news to Tom. So I called him up and said, hey, just checking because I know we recorded an episode and just want to let you know that it did not come out yesterday, and he was just beside himself. But it was a technical error that was not Tom's fault. So, and we're both alive. So it's a
Yep.
win-win all the way around.
I did something wrong. I still have yet to figure out what that was. And I usually check it on Tuesday. Usually I go to the barn, I come back up, it's after 7 o'clock, and I just check to see if it's had any plays yet. And usually, I don't know, it's like a quarter after 7 or 7:30, and it's already had, 50, 60 plays. I'm like, yep, everything must be working. And for some reason, I just didn't check Tuesday. And when you called me, I was like, holy cats, I never thought to look at it. And I looked at it and it said it was a draft, that it wasn't published. And I have no clue what I did because at the end, when you publish it or when you schedule it, it gives you an option to copy the link. And I had copied the link and I saved it to where I save all my link copies. And I don't know why it was a draft. I don't have a clue. I don't know what I did wrong, but I apologize to everyone for that. But I did think it was funny that people were getting a hold of Cameron wondering if I was okay
Yeah.
because the podcast hadn't come out yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it still counts. We were within a day's time period, a day's grace period there to overcome some technical difficulty. But yeah,
Yep. So
it was comical to me when they had texted me like, "Hey, just making sure everybody's okay." It's like, well, actually, I am on death's doorstep with this flu deal, but as far as I know, Tom's doing fine. But now I'm gonna check. You better
yeah,
believe it.
that
So
was the first thing Cam asked me. He says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'm grumpy, but other than
yeah,
that, I'm like, why?" And
yeah.
then that came up. I was like, "Holy cats!" So I've screwed them up before because there's an AM PM button, and occasionally
Oh,
I forget
yeah.
to hit the AM button, and it would come out, PM. And so I'll check it that Tuesday morning. I'm like, there's zero plays. Why is that? And then I look and it says it's scheduled. And I'm like, no, it should be out. Then I go back and I look and I'm like, yep, didn't get the AM button pushed. And so
Yeah.
messed that up. So the other announcement is this episode will mark 2 years since we've done this. And
Which is crazy. I mean,
I was gonna say, and we haven't missed a single Tuesday, but we have missed one Tuesday, but we
yep.
haven't missed a single week. So
In the
pretty
11th hour, missed
pretty
the
happy with that. And
it's
we
our
got
first Tuesday.
and we got our ranking back from Feed Spot, and we're in the top five grazing podcast and the top five sheep podcast again. So pretty happy with that. And technically, we're supposed to make mention of that. So
Yeah.
that Feed
Yeah, I'm
Spot
not
ranks us.
sure. I'm not sure what AI program they're using to quantify those. I think basically if you say anything about sheep, you count because the one that is
Yeah,
leading the charts and that is actually like a big game hunting podcast
yeah,
about wild sheep and
yep.
the pursuit of capturing that trophy. So, I'd like to bump us up an additional spot there because I do not think that those should be considered in the same category. But that's just my personal opinion. So
Yeah, my guess
the
is they probably just look at titles and number of plays,
yes,
and that's what they go by.
yeah.
Would be my
I'm going
guess.
to go out on a limb and just assume they've probably never actually listened to one of our episodes. So,
I would guess
so
not. I would guess
yeah,
not. I get oh, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 emails a week saying that they just, whoever it is, says they love our podcast and they want us to pay them so that we could get even more plays per week. And I'm thinking you probably have never listened to our podcast. You just see it
Yeah.
on
Have you
this.
asked them what parts they love about it?
No, I'll also get ones that they love our website, but they see there's need for improvement. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, because there's no website. That
Yeah,
would be
that
that
would
would
be
be
the biggest
that
improvement
would be the
for
biggest
sure.
improvement right there. So yeah, so we
Oh
know there's a lot
Lord.
of AI stuff going on, where they're just picking this stuff out and all that. But it is pretty cool. 2 years.
Yeah, that seems like again, like it was yesterday.
Hmm.
And it's been a lot of fun. I think we're gonna keep on
Yeah,
cruising with it and trying to come up with some new stuff as well to get integrated in. Um, this summer, maybe doing some field day, maybe doing some more tutorial type pasture walk, virtual pasture walk video stuff. So
yeah,
coming soon, we'll see if we can fit it into both Tom's schedule and into my schedule. And it's a lofty, that in and of itself is a lofty ask, let alone the content going into it. But
yeah.
it's something that, the platform, it's been really enjoyable. And honestly, I think what I'm most grateful for is just another avenue to meet other sheep people
Oh yeah,
and have some fun sheep discussions and ag discussions, and just a bigger sense of community there. So that's the part I'm probably the most thankful for, and it it makes it worth doing it, chatting with everybody out there on sheep. It's something that we both enjoy doing. But
hmm,
the other
absolutely.
thing, we've got some educational items coming up here this next week, and um, when this releases, or if you're able to listen to it when it comes out on Tuesday, because it will come out on Tuesday. But the Virginia Tech Shepherd Symposium 2025 symposium is actually kicking off that Tuesday and Wednesday, the 25th and 26th. And this is something, Tom, you've attended now for a couple of years
Yeah,
and really gathered and taken a lot of information away from.
yeah, and it's a webinar, so you don't have to travel to Virginia to go to
Yeah,
it.
all virtual, which is,
Yeah.
I think, kind of an interesting concept. Uh, a lot of our state sheep associations might have an in-person event, and those are great. We enjoy getting out there, encourage you to get out there and do that. But I think this is a product from uh, COVID, the pandemic,
Hmm.
and when they didn't have an option and went virtual and said, "Oh man, we've got a bunch of people showing up to this from a number of places, better attendance than we've ever had, and so let's keep doing this." And it also makes it a lot easier to get speakers. And pulled up the agenda here. I know Dr. Kelsey Bentley, all of the colostrum and antibody stuff that uh, many of you have probably heard about at this point. She's going to be talking about kind of those first steps in immunity and colostrum. And then they've got a number of course, Dr. Scott Greiner talking there in his home state about management tips that make sense. A little CENTS, little pun there. And that's something that if you ever get the chance to listen to him talk on economics of raising sheep, it's a treat. So that's the first night. And I think it's 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And then talking a little bit about the solar industry and solar grazing and parasite management, flock health tips, ASI update, and then an update on that Virginia sheep industry. So
Hmm.
I would definitely encourage those, if you hear this in time, encourage you to go and register for that. Then there's another event that Wednesday evening, kind of competing with the not on purpose, but EAPK Eastern Alliance for Production Katahdins has a webinar with nutrition in the immune system, which is that Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. So come over to the EAPK webinar and then hop over to the Virginia Tech webinar and finish off your evening for just a cram packed or jam-packed, crammed educational event this week, and it's wintertime, so
Yeah.
hopefully
And
it's supposed to be a little bit warmer.
the other good thing about both of those is they're recorded. So
They are.
if
Yes.
you miss the one, you can go back and find the recording for the other. So
Yep.
I'm pretty
Register, get the
sure,
links.
yeah, I'm pretty sure if you register for Virginia Tech, they will send you a link um, to the recording. So you can always
Yep.
register to go do something else and then come back and watch the recording whenever you have time. But it's definitely worth having
But
that on there.
should be fun content. This is yeah, it's I know, Tom, you've got a calendar and you're on a webinar all the time trying to
It
soak
seems
up
like it.
more more
Yeah.
information. And I mean, it is you're just bouncing around. In my mind, like I'm just bouncing around webinar to webinar.
Hmm.
Again, this time of year especially, you're inside, it's cold, throw the headphones on and maybe do something while you're listening, but soak up some knowledge and listen to what some people have to say, whether you agree with it or not. You might pull something beneficial out of it.
Yeah, February and March always seem to be just loaded with these webinars. Like I said, I think this is the greatest thing to come from COVID was the fact that a lot of these universities decided to put these webinars on. And I think, like you said, I think it was a temporary thing in the beginning, and they realized, man, we can reach a lot more people. We just continue to do this. And so I never would have ever driven down to Virginia Tech for 2 evenings of in-person stuff. It's just been too far to go, especially this time of year. You got lambs in the barn, and you want to be keeping an eye on them all the time. And so yeah, these webinars have been fantastic, and I hope people continue to do them, and I hope more people do them. I just encourage those who are doing them to record them, because there's quite a few that all happen at the same time, and you have to kind of decide, do I want to be able to ask some questions, or am I willing to just go back and listen to the recording? So, but there's lots of them, and we enjoyed listening to them, enjoy watching them, and I have gathered lots of information the last few years watching this stuff. So I think it's well worth it.
Yeah, I struggle to find like the last event I attended where you didn't pull something away
Mm-hmm.
from it. Even if the topic wasn't necessarily like right up your alley,
Mm-hmm.
um, there was something that was like, oh, well, that's different. I need to look into that. And so that might be something that helps somebody else out. Just again, throw the headphones on, do something else if you're like me and need to keep need to keep moving most of the time. But um,
Yep.
yeah, tis the season. But
So
speaking of that, Tom,
I was gonna say the other exciting news. I'm not sure where you were headed, but I've got the highest testing oatlage ever tested in mankind.
that's where I was headed with this. So
Okay.
yeah, if there was an award for some of the best hay produced on some of the most marginal live oat crop, Tom would be in the that first ranked spot. And he was deathly afraid. And we're going to talk about it here a little bit. Deathly afraid. This was hay that was wrapped, and
Mhm.
feeding wet hay to sheep. Some concerns with just toxins in that feed and how you're feeding it, as we should be concerned about that, or at least considerate about that. Waiting for that to come in, you emailed the test over, and I about hit the floor because as poor as what the crop did in the field,
Mhm.
I was I was very impressed with the type of hay that it made. So much to the point that we're probably going to call and see if we can get some seed ordered to get some oats in the ground here in March and see if we can make some early
Totally.
wet wrapped hay
Yeah.
on some ground that we're trying to convert over into a pasture environment. So yeah, it's really good stuff, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But just remind us a little bit, the ground that you're planting these small grains on is some newly acquired acreage.
Yep.
And what was the initial goal for this oat planting in 2024?
So the idea was, um, this guy that I'm renting this ground from, he wanted it. He wanted these two fields seeded into hay, and he doesn't have any hay equipment. So he wanted me to make hay on one field, which was a smaller field, and then I would square bale that, and just drop it on the ground, and he would pick that up, and that would be his hay. The bigger field, I could do whatever I wanted to do with, and so I said, well, I've had best luck if I plant that hay, seed that hay in the fall, which meant those fields are going to lay fallow all year. So we agreed to put oats in them, and I wanted that oats to feed in place of corn for per sheep when I'm feeding to flush them, or when we're lambing. And so I went in and planted that, and I think we set for 2.5 bushels per acre or 3 bushels per acre. So we were planting it heavy. Wanted to make sure everything was going good, and then we got it in late because it was so wet, and then it turned dry, and that all got about knee high, and that was it. And it all headed out, June 21st, which is pretty much what all those is going to do. And when it dried down and we went in to look at it to see, how much grain was in there, there was lots of little seed heads. But when you would strip some of that off, put it between your hand, rough it up, and then blow the chaff away, there was basically no seed in the chaff. It was just a little chaff pods. And so we decided that it just was not worth combining. And so
Yeah.
we just went in, mowed it all off, uh, just to get some straw off it, because that's all it was good for. And then I went back in and dished that ground up and got it all nice and smooth and seeded the hay in it. And of course, it remained dry. We got a couple little shots of rain, but those teeny tiny little oat seeds that you would find in there occasionally managed to germinate and regrow. And so it looked pretty good. The neighbor thought it was a Timothy coming, and I had to tell him, no, sorry, it's not.
Don't
I'm
get
like,
your hopes up. This
yeah, I'd
one
like to
will
tell you
die.
that was really, really nice Timothy coming, but no, it was actually that oat that was coming. And then the last week of October, he gets a hold of me and says, I'm worried because that's tall enough and thick enough that if it lays down, it might smother that hay crop that's underneath it. And so he wanted me to mow it off in the last week of October. Now it had been terribly dry and unseasonably warm, and so I opted to go mow it. And so we let it
Was this
lay.
the latest you had ever laid down hay before?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
everything was probably put away.
so I had to call around. I called like four different people to come round bale it for me. And luckily, there was a guy that he was a former 4-H student, and he had all his equipment put away, but he got it all out just for me. And he came and baled this. And I put it down on a Saturday, I think it was. And then that Tuesday, that stuff was so dry on top, you could have square baled it. Just made small square
Mm.
bales out of it. It was unbelievably dry, and I hadn't turned it over yet, and it was still wet on the bottom. But oh, it smelled so good. And then we got a little shot of rain Tuesday night, and it just kind of yellowed all that up. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah. But I still had to get it off there. So the following, it was November 5th. I don't remember what day that was, but November 5th. Um, the guy came over. I had it all raked up. He came over and baled it. And it didn't take him very long to bale at all. There wasn't that really that much there. And then we brought that home. And the next day we had a guy come in and wrap it, and we just let it set. And so we were
And
worried because we didn't know what we were getting into. Talking to people saying, yeah, if you get it just right, you can make a really nice feed. And a lot of people thought, geez, in November, you don't have enough daylight hours. That stuff's probably really slimy. You probably better have it tested for mycotoxins before you feed it. So we
right.
we called our feed company and asked them to come test this for us, and they don't charge us because we buy some stuff from them. And I was just going to have the mycotoxins done, and she said, "Oh, you might as well do the full thing." And so that's what we did. And so that I got that report back and was like, "Holy cats, this looks like really, really good feed." But I don't look at that many
Right.
reports, and I thought maybe I'm really looking at this wrong, and so I sent the information to Cam.
Yeah, it was pretty good stuff. And what I think's fun and the biggest takeaway for this is what I would consider not a great run at trying to make hay, trying to make any stored forage,
Hmm.
period. The end. I don't care if you're going to wrap it, you bale it dry. And on top of that, you had it custom baled with a baler that'll handle those wetter forages
Yep.
for wet wrapping, but did not turn the knives on, correct?
Right. Now I kind of
Okay.
wish I had though.
Yeah, because you're feeding it in the barn, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit, feeding it in the barn by forking it off.
Yep.
But when we look at the hay test, yeah, and again, this is not your primary hay crop. This was a second reseeding, a self-seeding situation that you're just trying to cut back some plant height
Hmm.
to not have the competition for that second or that what your primary crop was,
Yeah.
your perennial hay field that you put in. And so yield wise wasn't wonderful.
No.
But when we looked at the hay test that you sent, crude proteins on a dry matter basis up in the 15s.
I know.
And what traditionally have you been producing on that hay ground in your perennial hay ground that you've made hay on previously? What type of crude proteins are you seeing on that mixed grass hay?
It's usually around 9%.
Right.
It's not great protein at all. The first cutting, we've already grazed it a couple of times, so the palatability is a little higher, and so your NDF's usually a pretty decent number. But this stuff's like
Yeah.
rocket fuel.
And even, if we're killing it with, stage of maturity on our grass hay at 10, 11, 12% crude protein. So even there, we're gaining a little bit on the crude protein side of things. When we went down to TDN, in that 65%
Hmm.
range, again, for feed that was supposed to be marginal, we plugged values into the Montana State calculator, and basically all you need to accommodate all of the requirements in those U's were like 7 pounds as fed of uh, of this hay, and then I think it was a 1.25 or 1.3. I think is what I
Hmm.
told you of
Yeah.
a corn supplement mix, and that was just corn and soybean meal. So,
Yeah.
something that we'd probably have to get a little more creative, maybe up our grain intake on some of that dry hay. And we should bring this up too. It was 42% moisture when you tested it.
Hmm.
And so, probably, I don't know if it'd be quite wet enough to be considered silage. It definitely went through an ensiling process,
Yeah.
um, but not the moisture that we'd expect that what you would have been putting in the silo, a number of years ago.
Hmm.
Pretty dry compared to what that was.
Yeah.
And that makes sense after you kind of walk through the story, and that's why I wanted to have you do that. Of how many days was it on the ground? Yeah, again, a situation that we'd probably say, well, this is less than ideal. And then we end up with a product that, hey, if we actually put some time and effort and we're trying to make good forage, we could probably make some pretty good stuff. And I know before we started recording, I was telling Tom, I'd be tempted as good as this stuff turned out, spend a little money on some urea or some other form of available nitrogen that we could spread out there and boost our yield, because
Hmm.
that was probably the biggest shortcoming for
Oh
this
yeah.
crop was you just didn't have the tonnage that you would have liked to have had. And this is the year that you could have used more bales
Yeah.
than than what you
Well,
what you needed.
the reality was we weren't expecting anything to come up but the hay crop.
Right.
that was all we were looking for was the hay crop. We didn't think that any of that oats was going to come up. I was pretty shocked when it started to come. So it was just a fluke. So if you want to do this and mimic it, all you need is a year of drought, do everything wrong, plant everything late,
Right.
have a failed crop in the middle, and then this is the result you can get.
Yeah.
So, not the way I would tell anybody to do this, but it was
Yeah.
definitely a pleasant surprise on on something that pretty much all year looked like a total failure.
Yeah, needed a small win, and you started feeding this before you had the test back, and I remember you called up and said, "Man, this first bale just is I'm nervous." Yeah, it's kind of you feel like it's Russian roulette putting this in front of those sheep. They're getting ready to have lambs or they've just had lambs. What's
Hmm.
the palatability from the sheep been on this
Oh,
oat
they
hay?
they devour it. They eat it like crazy. We had some. So as ewes were lambing, we started feeding this, and we were still feeding, dry hay to everybody else. And we ended up one evening we had fed too much of it, and so when we went to clean it up, rather than just throwing it out, we threw it over to the ewes that hadn't lambed yet, and that was a bit of a mistake because they would not eat the dry hay afterwards. They just stood there and screamed. They wanted that oatledge, and it is amazing. I mean, as we have oats, as we have ewes lambing, we put them in a jug and then we run them down an alley after a day or so to put them in group pens. And they go past that bale, they forget all about their lambs and they just stop at that bale.
Just start eating.
They just
Oh,
start eating. It's not even like, oh, I wonder what this is. I'll have a nibble. No, they go right after it and just
right.
hammer it.
Oh man, that's
Like,
funny.
it was nuts. I just never see them react like that to this, but they flat out love it. So they
Yeah,
are
and
cleaning.
maybe
They're cleaning it up. It just depends, how much we feed. Now we set our bale up like a soup can, and just take the plastic off, take the net wrap off, and then we can just peel it off. This kind of just falls off. It hasn't been that hard to get apart at all. As long as you don't try to take it off in a thick layer, it's not too bad to get apart. And then we kind of stack it up in a wheelbarrow and wheel it, to the other end of the barn, and then take our hands and just kind of spread it out. The and we just gauge, this pen gets a wheelbarrow, this pen gets a wheelbarrow and a half, and so it's not very. I'm sure each wheelbarrow weighs quite a bit different, but that's just what we go by. And then through the day, if this pen's got all theirs cleaned up and there's some left in another pen, well, I'll grab some of that and move it around by hand. Not that big a deal. 'Cause I'm out there, I'm going to be checking them anyhow. So it's not a big deal to grab a fork and move some of it from here to there. But the idea is we'd like to have it as much of it cleaned up as possible. And so we've got a pen that has 4 rams in it. And so whatever's left, we'll feed to them, and they're all standing up on the gates as soon as we start. As soon as we start running a fork down through there, running a broom down through there, cleaning up, they want it really bad. But like I say,
yeah,
the ewes are hammering on it, and they just love it. And so far, it hasn't been that long, but so far, body conditions on those ewes are looking really good.
that's awesome. Well, and it should be. I mean,
Yeah.
for what you're getting in energy and protein, like
Mm-hmm.
it's more than what I know. It's more than what we're feeding. I can I can tell you that much. And I did have a question for someone that's maybe not fed, I guess what we'd call high moisture hay. It's not quite silage.
Mm-hmm.
It's not dry hay. We think about our traditional dry hay being less than 20% moisture, and this is more than double that at 42.
Mm-hmm.
But also drier than what we'd hope our traditional silage would be. Is there some moisture when you feel that bale, when you touch that bale with your bare hands?
Yeah, you can feel the moisture in it. It doesn't. It doesn't feel, I don't know, offensive. The worst part of it is if you have a clump of it, you cannot stick a fork into it.
Mm,
It just kind of wraps around the fork. It reminds me of oh, I'd seen a demonstration years ago. You can't shove an arrow through. You can't or shoot an arrow through silk if it's in a cape form because it just folds up around the arrow. And
Yeah.
and years ago, Chinese used silk as a shield. You'd think that'd be crazy, but they wore it like a cape. And so the arrow would hit it, and it would just wrap around the arrow. And that's how it is with a pitchfork. You try to stick a pitchfork into it when you have a clump of it, it just doesn't want to go.
Folds around.
It just
Yeah.
folds around it. So you really have to like slide the fork under it, and then you do anything you want with it. And it does kind of want to stick to your fork, but it's not offensive at all. I mean, it smells fantastic. I love it. But that very first bale we fed, when they came and tested them, they tested every other bale. And in that, when we wrapped them, we put a straw bale on each end to use as a plug. And we weren't worried about the outside, bale being exposed to weather. But that first bale that we fed, it was, I don't know, it didn't smell the greatest. And you could see some mold here and there in it. And I was really worried. I kept waiting, thinking, man, we need to get that report back. I might be killing all my sheep feeding them this.
Right.
Then,
Right.
but every bale we fed since then has been, really nice. And
Beautiful.
yeah, it's funny because it has a green color to it, and then you'll get into some that, that green stuff must have been a little drier, and then you'll get into stuff that looks more like your traditional silage, smells more like your traditional silage. But you're talking about very thin layers as you're finding this stuff. But it's been way easier to feed than I was afraid it would be. But we've been feeding
Yeah.
round bales like this in our barn for quite a while. We just set them up like a soup can, and then you just kind of start in one place, and I just use a three-pronged fork, and I just kind of work that fork down through it, just kind of scratching at it. And then all of a sudden you'll see a layer want to peel off, and then you just take that fork and you just peel that layer off all the way around. And then you can, feed that however you want to feed it. But, as opposed to our pens just aren't wide enough to I mean, a bale will fit in there, but then it just makes the pen too small.
Getting around.
Yep. And we
Yeah.
found that by feeding in an alley like this, we just get far less waste.
Well, and this year especially, normally we would be putting in, a round bale and a collapsible bale feeder. And, this year, just from a cost standpoint, a hay savings standpoint, trying to reduce waste by putting it all into double-sided, hand forking in flakes
Hmm.
or off of a round bale into a double-sided feeder and making those use clean up hay that we're probably at less than 3% waste.
Yep.
And if there is waste, it's because the guard dog comes over and uses
Yeah.
it as a bed, as opposed to the sheep pulling it out of the feeder.
Yeah. And so typically when we're feeding dry hay like that, whatever they don't clean up, we're sweeping up in the evening and we throw it over into the pens and it helps act as bedding.
And it
So
still has purpose.
yeah. Yeah. So with this stuff though, I don't really want to throw it into the pens because it's not dry and it certainly isn't going to absorb anything. So we'd rather just, make sure we have the right amount fed and the little bit we have left over, like I said, we've been feeding those to the rams and they've been enjoying it. So it's worked out fairly well.
That's
So
awesome.
so that's been my saga for the whole week. I waited and waited and waited for that report to come and it finally showed up and man, I couldn't wait to open it up and I was scared to death it was gonna be just chock full of toxins and I would just sit around and wait for my sheep to die. But
Right.
but there were no toxins in it whatsoever. Everything was good. So super duper happy with that. So we thank you for listening to another episode of the Grazing Sheep Podcast. There's a Facebook page, there's a YouTube channel. You can reach out to me at bigtomperkins@gmail.com. And I don't know if we'll get another 2 years in, Cam, but I'm pretty sure we can do at least one more year. So
Well, Lord willing, the creek doesn't rise.
that's the truth. Well, we've had the
We'll
creek
get
rise
there.
here quite often. So,
I'm hoping the creek rises here, if I'm being honest.
yeah,
So,
you'd like to, it'd be nice if it would flood there and get some water into your
yeah.
fields, huh?
Yeah, when the ground's not frozen.
Yeah, that's right. When the ground's not frozen. So, all right, Cam, then we'll catch up with you next week.
Sounds good, Tom.
All right, buddy. Bye.